for Gennari, who apparently 82.1 thousand people know of already on Instagram as Jen_art. Jennifer graduated from Ringling College in 2005, went on to the Florence Academy in 2008, came back to the city and was a painting assistant with Jeff Koons' studio. And she's taught at the National Academy in New York and the Long Island Academy of Fine Art. And she currently teaches privately in her studio in Brooklyn. It's called Studio West. We have some of her oil paintings here, which are for sale, believe it or not. Jen has written a figure drawing book. Yes, so in your spare time, you wrote a book on figure drawing. And also, Jen, when she and I spoke, Jennifer, when we spoke about this at the beginning, she described herself as a talker, and so questions are encouraged during the session. That was a long introduction. So after that, I'm really pleased to introduce Jennifer Gennari for her oil painting.
Is this it? I clip this on now? Okay. Okay. Is that good? Is it?
I think so, yeah. I think you want to
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay. We'll check online.
Okay, good. So yeah, he's totally right. I'm just gonna start, and while I'm working, I'll tell everybody what I'm doing. I'll, show you how I'm starting. Feel free to ask me questions while I'm doing it. It's no trouble. I will easily talk to all of you while this is going on. And then of course, while we're on a break, you come up and ask me more in-depth questions or take pictures of what I'm doing, whatever you want. So real casual, all right? Do you want to do 25-minute sessions? Would you like me to time you?
Let's do that. Yeah, we can set the timer.
Oh, I have.
Okay.
Good. Is that all right?
Yeah,
for me?
We have a 5-minute break every 25 minutes.
Yep.
We can go up and look at your progress.
Sounds good.
And I'm allowed to talk.
Yes, you are. I'll allow it. Okay. Just so everybody knows, this is a panel. I did not make it. And it is linen, oil primed. And I always just start with ivory black and yellow ochre. That's it. And then I'll kind of what I do is I'll dot a lot of colors on it, get some terps on it, just rub it in so that it gets real thin and transparent. And that's it. I could start on it, anybody can start on it while it's wet, or you could wait for it to dry. It's just if you start while it's wet, keep in mind that this will start mixing into your colors. So the black and yellow ochre is easy enough to fight through. It won't kill any of your colors straight away. But just if you do it and you start with it wet, keep in mind that that could be a problem that you're having, okay? So I'm also only using linseed oil. I always do that. I don't ever use terps. I have absolutely nothing against terps. I just don't use them. It's only linseed oil. I always start everything with just a little bit of oil. Somewhere in the middle, it ends up turning entirely into paint, no linseed oil at all. And then at the end, I'll probably start throwing a little bit more linseed oil back in. You ready?
Well, it's sitting 5 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm so ready. Okay.
So what are we going to talk about?
I don't know. What do you want to talk about? Oh, can you just turn your head? Yeah, perfect. So I end up doing a lot of sketchy things in the beginning. What I'm looking for is just for me to be able to see where it's going to sit on the canvas. None of these marks are particularly accurate to him at all. I'm just sort of getting an idea of the shape of his head and where that's going to sit here. So that way later on, I'm not like shocked that something is falling off of the canvas.
Talking about when you started painting full time.
Yes. So I started painting entirely full time, with barely any teaching in about 3 or 4 years ago. I was working for Jeff Koons, then that stopped. And then I was teaching and painting. And now I teach and paint. Okay, also what I'm doing right now is it stays really sketchy and loose in the beginning. And I'm focusing entirely on shadow shapes. It's actually, for me, a little bit funny because I'm somebody who was obsessed with linear work. I never, ever was on board with doing anything involving mass painting. Mass meaning just all shapes, no lines. And now, while I paint, it's basically the only thing I do. I just feel like, for me, because I'm somebody who can make things very precious very quickly, and I get less attached to what I'm doing if I keep everything like this, all mass. I feel like it keeps the painting open and ready to be worked on, and I don't become afraid of losing something that I may have like inadvertently gotten attached to in the beginning.
You're using ivory black?
Yes, there's ivory black in this. It's ivory black and some English red. That is always my go-to to start. It's a habit I got into early on and just never felt like I needed to abandon. I like it because it's pretty easy to see. And just because there's a little bit of that English red in there, the color is just a little bit more accessible. It feels a little bit more alive because there's red in it. It's only ivory black and English red.
When it comes to color mixing on your palette, do you prefer to mix on with palette knives, or do you just alternate between brushes and, I guess, the former?
I will only use my brush. I'm somebody who's very reactionary. Outside of just like this general outline I give to myself in terms of like, oh, I'm doing shadows, and then I'm gonna just focus on value. I like to keep everything very ready to be worked on and like to be able to do things very quickly. Anytime I need to put the brush down and sit there and mix with a palette knife, I feel like it really slows me down, and I just don't really find it too necessary. I also don't use a tremendous amount of color. Like my palette's pretty simple actually. And within each mixture, like when I'm making a new color, I really only try to mix like between like 2 to 4 colors into it to make a new color. And I think because that's pretty simple, things won't get too muddy. You know, like there wouldn't be too much of a need to like sit there and mix with a palette knife and make sure everything's staying clean. So a lot of what this is too that I'm doing is I'm just working out a lot of proportions. Nothing is looking like him tremendously right now. But obviously you see that we're getting a shadow side, we're getting a light side, and I'm understanding these are the eye sockets. This is a rough idea of like the length of his nose, from the nose philtrum down to the mouth, and then the chin. So these things are what I'm after. Eyes to nose and down. It's all about big shapes into little shapes. So people can't really see my face, but I'm squinting a lot. In the beginning, I barely paint with my eyes open. It's a lot of squinting because when you squint, it takes away a lot of detail and it lets you focus entirely on large shapes. Okay, so this is now done. The whole time that you're working, you're not gonna do something, you're not gonna do a drawing, and then you're gonna do values, and then you're gonna do color. None of those things are ever done. You're gonna be working them all at the same time. So we've established our values, and that's sort of done for now, but the whole time that I'm working, the whole time anybody is working, you should always be worried about your values. Your drawing is never done, your values are never resolved, you're always exploring color. So never do a drawing to start and feel like, yeah, I totally nailed this, this is great, and then abandon it, and then only now. It's like, just now I'm doing color. Like if you see something that needs fixing, make sure you do it. Like always go back to your drawing. Your drawing is the most important, followed very closely by value. Color is also important, but those other two things are paramount. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I am gonna go into value. I'm gonna block off basically the rest of this uncovered canvas, and when I'm doing that, I'm gonna be refining all of these shapes in here. So I'm grabbing, I have like a touch of black in this. Now it's almost all English red. I'm gonna grab some yellow ochre. So you can see maybe that that's very red and not much of anything that's going on up here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm pretty happy with the value. You can see that this is, maybe you can see that this is going pretty well next to this dark shape. So it's transitioning well, but I don't like the color. It's way too red. So what I'm gonna do is leave the value I have here, but just throw in a little bit of green so that it just sort of neutralizes it a little bit. How long have you been working for Artsy?
7 years.
Okay.
Almost since the beginning.
Cool.
Sorry.
Wait, what was the question?
I asked him how long he's been working for Artsy.
And I'll try to speak louder, but I want to move too much. I'm not let you know if I'm annoying.
Don't worry about it.
7 years, almost since the beginning, since it was a maybe 8 people company.
Hmm.
We're passing 200. Right?
Whoa. That's great.
Ask me anything.
it the largest online auction site or something like that?
It's the largest online art publication and certainly the biggest gallery network and auction network. Something like over 2,000 galleries now, and I think 20, 30, 40 something auction houses. I don't remember the number.
Wow.
So you can go buy and bid. When you buy works from galleries, we don't take commission. It's a subscription service. And then from the auction houses, we take commission. But it's free for users.
Okay, so now I have a little transitional step here. This color, this value, was only used to help me refine this shadow side of his face. I didn't obviously want to put that everywhere because I'm sure you could see it's quite dark. So now I'm going to try and make a larger jump into some of these lighter shapes. Also, my paintings tend to be very dark in the beginning, and I also tend to exist very much in like the middle range of values. I exist in like the middle of the scale, and then right at the end I'll push the darks, and then I'll throw in the lights. I just feel like it helps me see things a little bit better. I don't really enjoy seeing things at extremes in the beginning.
I want to hear what inspired you to paint.
Oh, well, I can tell you what inspired me to get into art. Painting actually ended up being this like, well, it's like a full-on passion at this point, but it ended up starting almost accidentally. The reason I went to Ringling College was because I was obsessed with Disney. I like had to work for them. And I went to Ringling because that was where they were taking a lot of their, that's where they were hiring from. It was like one of their top schools that they were taking people from. So I was obsessed with art from a really young age. I saw a commercial for The Little Mermaid, and I had to see it. And my mother ended up having this really random reaction to me. I came running into the other room and I just said to her, I'm like, I don't care what we're doing, but we have to see this movie when it comes out. I was obsessed with it just from the trailer. And for whatever, what?
Because of the animations?
I think, I mean, I was young. I was like 4 or 5. So I think I was pretty much just obsessed with the fact that I saw a mermaid on the TV. I think that was kind of it. But my mother said to me, which I really think, I would love to know from her, like, why this was the reaction. But she just said, oh, well, you know what, like, you know, we'll definitely go and see it, but like until then, like, why don't you just go in the other room and you can draw the characters right now? And that blew my mind as well. And I did, and it really was quite literally at that moment was when I basically never stopped drawing. I was just obsessed. But like when I got to college, I realized like that I just wanted Disney and just animation in general, like all of that to be a little bit more fun for me, like just as something I can like enjoy on my downtime. I didn't really want it to be a job. So what I was doing was when I had a job, I was working for Hallmark as well. Well, one, I never really liked that, but I would come home and I was always working like on painting. I was trying to paint and it wasn't good. Like it was really pretty bad what I was doing. And one of my friends showed me the work of Ramiro Sanchez. If anybody knows him, he's one of the Florence Academy guys, one of the original guys in Florence. And I was just like floored. I did not realize that people could paint that way. Like I was pretty convinced that my friend was just showing me the work of like an old master. And so when I realized that that wasn't the case, before I knew it, I was living in Florence and learning how to paint. But I love it. Like at this point, I don't know why I was ever trying to do anything else.
When did you know you were good?
I don't know, am I?
You managed to get thousands of people on Facebook Live video.
Yeah, right?
We're at 10,000.
10,000.
Oh my goodness.
That is more people than members of Drawing New York. They should all join. I highly recommend it. Space that drawingnewyork.com.
Okay, so we are continuing to address the drawing. I am not concerned with color. I probably won't be for a while. I'm very concerned with value. I am one of those people who I'm obsessed with value. I think that the only way that you're going to know if you're doing a good painting is if you can either squint or turn it into a black and white image, and if it still holds up in that black and white form, that's how you know you're kind of on the right track. Value is extremely important. And I'm saying that because as I'm doing that, I'm mixing up a little bit of red here. And that's only because from my own experience, whenever there's a color that's a little bit foreign to the face, like sure, he has in him red, very similar to his lips, but it is a standout color and it's more chromatic, bless you, it's more chromatic than other things that are happening up there. So if I don't put that in now, it's going to throw off some of my colors when I actually do put them in. So what I'm doing now is just, you know, even what I'm doing, it isn't particularly vibrant. It's not very accurate to what is happening up here. But it is a bit of a nod to that color, so that way I can like mentally acknowledge that it's there, and it helps me with my colors when I actually start putting them in.
Other than, I guess, contemporary artists, who are some of your favorite old masters?
I like, so I'll just say Sargent right away to get that out of the way, because everybody says Sargent, but I do love him. I'm actually pretty obsessed with him. But I do love lots of others. I'm a big fan of Zorn. Do we know him? Do you know that person?
Yeah.
Big fan of Zorn. Actually, I was just talking to somebody today about how much I really love Dean Cornwell. Did you ever see any of Dean Cornwell's work?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love Dean Cornwell. I'm a big fan of that narrative. Not his narrative, but like the ability to incorporate a narrative into your work. Who else? Like totally drawing a blank. I don't know. Any rush? Oh yeah, I mean, come on. Of course, I love Repin. Repin's phenomenal. What? Yeah. Yeah, so good. Who's the other one? It always starts with a K. What is it? No. He's older. 19th century guy. I want to say, no, I don't think that's right. It's like Koryevsky or something, but that's not it. The one I'm thinking of that he did is, it's a woman, she's wearing a black dress, she's got like a top hat. It's a shot sort of like from the bottom and she's in a carriage.
Oh,
Right?
yes, I know the painting, it's beautiful.
Yep. And I always blank on his name. Starts with a K.
Yes.
Also, by the way, what I'm doing is, it looks like I might be grabbing a lot, but I'm not. I'm only alternating like a few, like probably like 3 different colors to balance something out that's a little bit more of a green. I do know that his face from here down has more of a blue and a green in it, whereas up here we've got more like reds and ochres. So similar to the lips, whenever there's a big color jump in there, there's just not really too much of a point for me to stick with colors like this when I'm very aware that in a very short period of time, I'm going to be trying to make this more blue. So I'm just sort of going for it right now. Still thinking. Oh, I'm also a huge fan of Thayer. I actually wrote a whole little thing about him in, does anybody read the Epoch Times? That's a great publication, written by this woman, Milen. She's wonderful. And she asked me, she does like a thing where she asks artists to talk about people who matter to them, people like masters for inspiration. And I chose Thayer and I did like a whole little write-up about him. I absolutely love him. So if people don't know Thayer, I really think that you should. Beautiful work. He has great representation of like the female as a concept, more than just like a glorified still life object. Like he really had a lot of respect.
And then in the contemporaries, figurative painting.
Well, I did, oh. Break.
Black when you start animal portrait.
Yep, all the same. None of my colors change. My palette is the same for everything I'm doing. The only way I'd ever imagine my palette changing is if I was getting into plein air. These colors I don't feel like lend themselves well to that, because I've got a lot of earthy colors on my palette. And even like if you're going to go out and do plein air, like this wouldn't even be the ground that you'd use for it. You want to start with something pretty vibrant, right? You do like plein air, wouldn't you want that?
I mean, I like something like more neutral, but people like Mark Lesser use transparent red oxide.
Yeah. So basically, though, this is too dark for plein air. Yeah. Okay.
Would you mind calling out the colors you have?
Sure. I have ivory black, English red. So this should be vermilion, but it's actually a cad red today. Not
red?
Yeah. So, but vermilion is my color. This is just sort of the one I have today. I have alizarin crimson, cobalt blue, viridian, emerald green, yellow ochre, and lead white. I can tell you all of those again, and you know.
Is your mic working or yeah? Okay.
Do you want me to put it up?
Yeah, maybe. That's good. Okay, thanks. We'll see.
Does that sound better? Good? Okay, all right. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Were questions answered? Did I answer? Okay. Yeah, perfect. Good. Okay, so we're just gonna move on. I'm gonna cover the rest of this. So what I think I'm going to do is just for now, I'm going to try and speed up a little bit so that we could get this covered. So I probably won't talk as much, but feel free to like keep asking me questions. Anything that comes to mind, I'll chat back to you.
You can use this time to do what Simon says. Simon said to advertise for Drawing New York. Just drawingnewyork.com and Drawing New York on Meetup and Drawing New York on Instagram. You should be taking pictures now and tagging all of you and following.
Now, are you being paid?
I'm not being paid. The other two Instagrams that you want to tag is Jen's, which is Gennari,
Yeah.
JEN_art. Everybody knows how to spell art.
That's right.
Mine, if you care, and if you're generous enough to tag or follow, it's very long. It's art, in one word, art, dblock, DBLOCK, dot, so DOT spelled out, org, ORG, artdblock.org. And Jen's is full of amazing paintings. And she's definitely also an artsy with her galleries.
Am I going to need to pay you for this promotion?
No, it's a subscription service. There's no commission. I would love to know, you paint a lot of animals.
I do, yes.
Like really cool looking cats.
Mm-hmm.
What's that about?
Well, that actually just started because I was doing so much work at my studio, doing figurative work and everything. And I'd come home for the day and I'd be like just so convinced that I was done. I was like, I am so ready to just like not be painting anymore. I was just exhausted. But like it was starting to get to this point where I was really I was starting to feel like, no, like after I basically like came home and had some dinner, I was like really ready to work again. And I knew that I didn't want to paint people anymore. I was just tired. I needed something like really different to do. So I found this girl, Alicia Rios, and she photographs those Sphinx cats that I paint a lot. And I just took one of hers and I painted it for fun. And that the photograph of the cat that she took, and I loved it. It was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. And I never told her that I did it just because it was meant to be this one-off. But I really loved doing it. So I ended up contacting her and saying like, hey, this was supposed to be a one-off, but I'm actually like really loving this. So I'm planning on painting more from your photos. Is that all right? So she said yes. She said I was allowed to do that. And as long as I credited her. And that was it. Like that was literally it. Like I became obsessed with it. I painted a bunch from her. And then really started branching out just entirely for fun. And then one day I posted one and people actually liked it and wanted to buy it. And it is what it is now. Like I take on a ton of commissions. I still do them for fun. Like whenever I can, I'm still doing them for fun. For fun meaning like just really random ones that I'll pick for myself to do. But a lot of it now is commission work, which I love doing because people always end up giving me a little story about their animal. And for like a long stretch of time, for whatever reason. These things always kind of come in waves. Like for whatever reason, all of a sudden I was getting a ton of commission requests for all of these people's animals who had passed away. So all I was doing was painting deceased animals and like hearing their little sob stories, and I was just, it's completely heartbreaking. But then of course you'd get like the big thank yous at the end, and it's like, oh, you brought them back to us, and I was completely, I'm a sucker, so I was like loving that. And yeah, one of the most heartbreaking ones was, well, they're all heartbreaking, but I from Alicia, where I was getting the photo references of the cats, I painted this one, which actually at the time, because I was only doing its face, I didn't realize that it only had 3 legs. So this person ended up reaching out and they're like, oh my God, you painted my cat. Ended up hearing the whole story about this cat, and this cat had a pretty rough, it had a wonderful life, but it started out a little rough. It fell out of a window when it was a kitten and broke its leg so badly that it had to get amputated. So that's why it had 3 legs. But then later on, it was discovered that it had a heart condition, and eventually ended up passing away from this heart condition. And there was like this whole story about trying to get this painting for this person's partner as a gift, and they wanted it to be for Christmas, and they were hoping that the cat would make it to Christmas, and it was this whole thing, and I was like losing my mind listening to this story. It was so sad. But the cat did eventually pass away. Those are the stories I hear. Everybody tells me like how their cat was injured, what's wrong with the animal, like how long the cat has to live. Like I'm getting all of this information. Somebody even sent me a picture of, I did a painting for them, and then they didn't know how long the cat would have to live, and they ended up sending me a photo of this little toy they made for it that they were going to end up having like buried with the cat. And I'm like just crying. I'm like losing it listening to this story. I'm just, so that's what it is now. I'm always happy to hear these stories because they're just so full of love. But my God, there was like a few months straight where all I was doing was hearing these stories and just like in a really dark place, and I didn't really understand why. I was like, oh, it's because all I'm doing is listening to these heartbreaking stories.
Jennifer, somebody's asking if you have favorite brands for the different, and based on the amount of pigment versus the amount of oil.
I do. I use now actually a lot of Sennelier paint. I also use a lot of Michael Harding. I have I have 2 colors. I have my black and my white is actually from Rublev. So those are my favorites. Rublev, Michael Harding, and Sennelier. Michael Harding is just sort of like a nice, solid, reliable brand that I use a lot. It makes up about half of what I've got here. Sennelier is also great. They have a lot of, it's real wet paint. There's a lot of oil in it that I like because I don't use a ton of medium. So it's nice that it's just, it moves around really well on its own. I don't need to put a lot of oil in the mixture to have it work. So Sennelier is great for that. I do find Sennelier to be a bit transparent. So if you're even like their opaque colors, there will be an odd amount of transparency in it. which doesn't always work for me, which is why I'll have like a Michael Harding in there as well. Rublev, I love specifically for their they've got a lot of really great like lead colors. The one I have here is a stack lead white, and I love the stack lead white. Well, apparently, from what I've been told, is that their stack lead white is the closest people have come to mimicking the lead white that I believe they said that it was like that like Rembrandt was using. All I know is that I love it. It's got like a lot of legs. Like you could see, I don't know if you guys could see, but that's just a result of me grabbing it, and it just like strings itself onto the palette. Like it's nice because it's sort of like when you grab it, you're sort of like activating it. That's the only way I can like wrap my head around what's happening, because it stays pretty solid. And then when you get it going, it loosens again, and then you can get it on your canvas. And once you start using more and more of it, you sort of get this like instant impasto with like barely trying. So that's like just like I love it. So it handles a lot like a typical lead paint where it's transparent, but it has a ton of body to it, which I love. I do on smaller things, like this is an 11 by 14. So like 11 by 14, like 9 by 12, 11 by 14, 16 by 20. Anything after 16 by 20, I'll go back to like a stretched canvas. But I actually prefer it more than a stretched canvas, actually. Just even I think for like archival reasons, like if you're going to start talking about that, painting on a solid support is better than a stretched linen.
Is there a particular brand you use?
Yeah. I like these. This is what is it? It's got kind of like an epic name. It's called like Centurion. I really like it because I like the linen that's on it. There's like a nice tooth to the linen. It's oil primed, which I like. And they're pretty affordable. They come in a pack of, the 11 by 14s come in a pack of 3, I think. The 9 by 12s come in a pack of 6, and the 9 by 12s are something like $45, something like that. But you're getting 6 of them, so I think that that's pretty good. Like especially for like what this is, like what the linen is, and like having the nice oil ground on it. So I buy those a lot. But like for like larger work, if I'm going to stretch some linen, I buy the Claessens 12 or a Raphael. I don't remember the tooth that's on the Raphael one because I actually only just bought it once. Like I kind of just got that one and I like it. I actually don't really remember what I bought.
What color combination are you using for the shadow and the nostril?
That is actually this. That's just the black and the English red.
Will that stay? Or are you going to...
No, I think I'm probably going to lighten that. And actually what I'm doing now that this is laid in roughly, what I'm going to do now is go into the shadow and start picking it, like making it a lot more like the shadow I'm seeing, like moments that are significantly bluer, moments that have a lot more like a pink in it. The whole thing needs to feel a little bit more airy, even though this is really thin, and I love that. There's a lot of color happening here that I just don't have at all, and I need this to now be here so that I can make better decisions on this side. So.
Ever do portraits from photograph?
Yeah, I do. A lot of people, like if people can come to my studio at least for like one session, that would be great. And a lot of them will try. Like I just did a portrait for a woman in, hi. I just did a portrait for a woman in Canada, and she actually came all the way down so that like I could work with her for a little while. But you know, I don't know, like I think that working from life is the best. Obviously I like to talk. I encourage the model to speak as well, just because I just feel like when you get to work from life, well, it's fun to get to know the person you're painting, but what I like about it is that you're getting to choose the best moments of each session. It can be annoying, like if you're working and like the light's always changing. Sure, there's plenty of frustrations, but you're also getting a lot of good in it. Like this idea that you can cherry pick like the best moments of like every 25 minutes or every 3 hours that you're with the person. And I think because of the movement, whether they're talking or just like naturally like swaying in the pose, there's a life that's infused into the work that I just don't feel like you can really get from a photograph. Also, the downside of a photograph is that a lot of decisions are already made for you. It's like, these are the colors, this is your lighting situation, now just copy it. It's pretty cold. And also, you know, if you don't have a lot of experience working from photos or life, and like you don't really understand like the upside or downside to either working with either one, you can end up getting stuck on things like weird camera distortions. What? Well, yeah, like, so like if you're gonna take a photo, like if I were to take a photo of him and I'm like taking it from here versus back here, the closer the camera's gonna get to him, there'll be like a weird distortion. Like, you know, like his hand might look huge, or, you know, like his head might end up looking like really small. Like there's some like weird stuff that happens just naturally with the photo if you're not aware of it. So that color, lighting, the fact that you are just working from a static image versus having somebody right here in front of you, those are a lot of the reasons that people can tell that you've done something from a photo. So now I'll always like advocate for working from life, but you can't always do it. Like, you know, I'm going to be working on a portrait coming up with this woman from Philadelphia. It's not particularly far, but she's also not really that interested in traveling. So I have to go to her and we'll have a session there. But then it's going to be up to me to work entirely from the photos I take. Because I've worked from life, I'm aware of how to deal with that situation. Like, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a lot of photos, lots of different lighting situations. Some of them will be blurry, some of them won't be. Like, I like to give myself all of the options. Options like problems that you'd have from working from life. So that way, I'm giving myself an opportunity to cherry pick from all the different photos that I've taken. So I have nothing against working from photos. I just think that you have to be very aware of what you're doing and very careful.
How many years did it take you to have such a good eye for the proportions? Because I find myself, I still have to measure, I still have to try to work that out a little more than you seem to have.
I don't know. You know, sometimes you really nail it. Like there's times I'm working and I'm like, wow, I like totally got this. This is great. And then there's other times where I'm working just like this and it's like you just cannot get it. Like I still struggle with it, but you know, it does, I guess, get to a point where you have a little bit more confidence than you used to. And I think that that's just experience, like just understanding the situation you're in, like even like the kind of face you're looking at, like you become familiar with certain proportions. And even just like certain poses, you know, it's like if his head was down, like totally downturned, you'd know like straight off the bat, like no matter what I'm seeing, like this distance is going to be foreshortened because the head's down, you know, little things like that, that you just sort of know straight out the gate that you may not know when you're first starting out. So I think it's just experience. And also, you know, like the thing that helped me quite a bit is this idea of like working in mass rather than line. I like the idea of being able to move shapes around more than line. It helped me speed up. Not that that's a thing that I think people should do, like speed is not necessarily important. But I am a bit of an impatient person, and this stage like isn't necessarily my favorite. I'm not actually a big fan of detail, but I like the stage right after this, like when I can really get in there and like work out a few smaller shapes, like fine-tune colors, stuff like that. So I'm usually in a hurry to cover the canvas. And I found that I could do that a lot easier when I'm just moving big chunks of shapes around rather than having a line drawing. Break. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Good, good. Oh, good. I hear the heater. It's so cold.
I don't know if you covered this already, but did you talk about your brushes?
I did not.
Okay, we have
Okay.
10,000 people.
the 10,000 people we call the best question.
At drawingyour.com.
And it's artsy.net, right?
That's
Not
right.
artsy.com.
No, it's owned by someone else. It's not wanting to part with it.
Oh, shame.
All right. So your brushes,
Yeah. Oh, that's it? What are they?
the size and the brands.
Okay. You know, I don't know how much I'll be able to speak to the size, let's say, because I don't even know what I'm buying. Okay, I have a 5, a 3, and a 2 here. I find that to be appropriate for this size. I like to use the largest brushes I can for as long as I can. So there's that. That's the size. And I've jumped around to a lot of different brands. I love Escoda brushes. I tried Rosemary for a while. And they're all good. But for however it is that I work, I am very partial to these Robert Simmons Signet brushes. That I just find them to be the most durable. I don't find myself to be a particularly aggressive painter, but there's something about what I do, how I'm doing it. My brushes tend to kind of like fall apart a little bit. I don't know, maybe I'm not great at taking care of them. I'm not sure. All I know is like whatever it is that I'm doing, these Signet brushes really hold up. I love them. They hold their shape. They are bristle, yep. I love them.
Do you use any natural or synthetic?
I have a few synthetics. I have some sable. I only use them at the end though. I just feel like they don't let me get the paint on. I feel like they encourage a certain amount of like just thin painting that I don't like. I prefer thick paint. So the bristle I think can really help me get there. Oh, and to that, like one thing that I always do is I keep the whole painting stays kind of thin in the beginning. Shadows are thin all the way through. I like thin shadows, thick lights. I like this idea, like I think about it as if I'm like pulling the image out of the darkness, kind of like it's it ends up feeling a lot more sculptural, I think, for me when I'm working that way. It stays thin and I'm just sort of like bringing this out. So this is where all of the thick stuff's gonna happen and it's just gonna stay pretty thin over here.
What swayed you away from using other mediums, like contemporary things like, I don't know, Gennari makes all these high-tech things that you just use like regular C.T.O. for?
Nothing really swayed me away from it. I'm just a big fan of keeping things pretty simple. You know, I was always really obsessed with the concept of the Zorn palette, like just using really minimal color. I use way more than he did, but I like the idea of that. I like the idea of just getting a lot out of like the bare minimum. And I don't really think there's anything wrong at all with exploring mediums. I just, for what I do, I don't see the point. I just buy linseed oil and go from there. It's nice and easy. It's archival, which I also love. Linseed oil is not actually the best one. You could buy walnut oil, poppy oil. Those are technically better than linseed oil because they're not going to yellow over time. But they are slower to dry, which is why I think a lot of people will stick with linseed oil. It helps move the paint around and it's gonna dry. Poppy oil in particular, I think it's poppy, is the slowest of the dryers. It's also the one that's not gonna yellow the most anyway. But yeah, that's it. I have nothing against mediums. I just don't feel like I need them really. It might be subject to change later on, but for now I don't need them.
So you never pursued a particular other medium for a long time?
The only thing I'll use once in a while, and it has everything to do with just building up body, is oleo gel. Yeah, I will use that once in a while.
How do you use that?
You've never used it?
How do you use
Oh, I use it just like I'm using this linseed oil. Anytime I feel like I want to like get a little medium in there, I just dip it. It comes out like a paste. You apply it to your palette the same way that you'd apply your paint. And you just grab it. You grab it as if you'd be grabbing one of these colors. It's like, here's my mixture and a little oleo gel. It's great. It adds, it helps the paint move and provides a nice body, which is great. Also, so you're probably seeing that I'm starting to put in some color here. I'm not just randomly throwing in color. I'm really looking at the shapes of everything. I'm concerned with the drawing still. So I see a color like this on him. So once I locate that and mix a color that is going to work for me right now, I then look at the shape that color is, and I paint that shape in.
Is the background, are you going to keep that tone, or are you going to add some color to it?
I am going to put a color back there probably. Yeah, I'll put a color back there.
We had someone ask what colors you're using in the flesh, so I feel that's down to what you are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, any particular colors
I'm using a lot of yellow ochre. On the lower half of his face, I'm using a lot of yellow ochre, some cobalt. Just like a tiny touch of red, like a tiny touch of English red. For everything else, also a lot of yellow ochre. And honestly, it's really kind of the same mixture, like some touches of blue, lots of yellow ochre, but I'm putting in more red. I have a real limited palette, so it's not like I have a particular color that I'm grabbing for flesh. I am really using the same colors everywhere, just sort of like, you know, if I'm grabbing a certain amount of yellow for this one half of the face, I might grab a little more or less of it for a different mixture. But yeah, I don't have anything. There's no like specific color I'm grabbing. I'm just
tend to follow the rule of the yellow in the forehead, the red in the cheeks,
what is that? What do you mean? Or I didn't really hear what you said.
follow that rule of putting more yellow in the forehead, more red in the middle, and then blue as you go down.
Yep, totally. That's exactly it.
Prefer to paint women, men, or animals?
I do not have a preference, but when I'm doing larger scale work, my concepts always end up being involving females.
Swords? Can you talk about?
But what?
Can you talk about the more conceptual work?
What
You pick what these women carry or wear?
Well, I'm not someone who has, I think I'm somebody who does have a lot of ideas. It's just, it's their staying power. It's like, how long am I gonna like this idea for? So when I'm hit with an idea, with a concept, I like to try and sit with it for a while. Like I just finished a painting that had a woman and a bunch of snakes in it. And I sat with that idea for about a month or two. And once I realized that I still liked it, like that idea was, you know, I wasn't getting bored of it. That's when I knew that I should do it. So I don't have a ton of paintings going at a time because like I really need to decide I just, because I can get so bored, I really need to know it's going to work. So the most paintings I'll ever have going at once is only like 2 or 3. A lot of the times it's really just one. So with that said, like I'm just basically waiting for ideas to hit me. And the one I just finished came to me like while I was in a park with a friend, and we saw this family, and I mean, it's just, it's gonna sound so random, but like we ended up talking about religion, and we ended up talking about like the Old Testament versus the New Testament, and like I had some questions, and there were things that were a little unclear to me, like things I wasn't like remembering. And we got into talking about like the concept of the snake, and I had said, oh, well, the snake is, wasn't that like the devil? And my friend was like, well, actually that was something that was imposed on like the snake as a, it was more of an idea of temptation rather than the devil. So I was like, oh, well, you know, like that's actually pretty interesting. So I just sort of, that was it, a pass, like end of conversation. So I ended up reading a short story the next day by an author I love, Haruki Murakami. If anybody knows that guy, I love him. I was reading, what was it called? It was a whole book of short stories, like Men Without Women, something like that. I think that was the one. And it had something like 6 stories in the book. Got to the one, it was like the last story in this book. And the main character was being told a story by his aunt. And in this story, they were talking about snakes and how the way that you kill a snake, the only way that you can kill a snake is to find where the snake buried its heart, find the heart, destroy the heart, and then you can cut the head off the snake and then it'll actually die. So I was fascinated by that. I just liked the imagery of it. And it just so happened to tie into this like really very random conversation I was having with my friend the other day. And then I had this image just like shoot into my head for a painting. And it became what it is now. Like I just finished it. So it's always just like the ideas come to me at like really random times. Just I get like a flash of an image.
Who's the woman in the painting?
Who is she? Like, is she a friend, or is that what you mean?
A real person?
Yeah, she's a friend of mine. But in the painting, she's supposed to be more of just like an idea. Like the whole piece ended up becoming about temptation and kind of like freeing yourself from it. Just based entirely on a random conversation and a book I was reading.
Your friend pose and you got her dressed. I haven't seen the painting.
She did pose. She posed a few times, and then I ended up finishing it from photos. The painting has a ton of snakes in it, so I didn't think that she'd want to pose with a bunch of snakes, so I ended up just finding a ton of references of snakes and just working that out. That was very mentally draining, trying to figure that out.
You work in a studio?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my studio's in Greenpoint.
You come home and you paint more.
I do, yes. That's where I'll paint the cats. So I paint like the larger work in the studio, and then I paint a lot of the animal commissions and stuff at home. So what I'm doing is I'm refining my values, paying attention to my shapes. I'm refining my values, and I'm starting to mix more color. Get more of these subtleties, how he's got a certain amount of purple here. And I'm seeing a lot of blues over here that have a lot of ochre in it. But then I'm going to be able to work in almost like a purple here, which is going to be kind of fun. So I'm taking little baby steps towards that now.
I think you mentioned before how most of your things kind of have like a darker, or I guess a low key color palette. Are you ever, I guess, tend to have like a higher key, I guess, color scheme?
Sometimes, but it's rare. Like, what do you mean? Like, you mean like from a concept stage? You mean like to have something set up that is naturally light? Is that what you mean, or?
I mean, like, does it just inadvertently occur, or are you able to, I guess, go into something and, from start to finish, like, see the colors keep one, I guess, I don't know what the word is, but for lack of a better term, I guess, harmony?
Yes, sometimes they get keyed to on the brighter end of the spectrum, and I don't like that. I really don't. I try desperately to avoid that. The reason why I like to keep everything in the middle, it sits better with me. Like, I feel like I can see things better. I feel like it allows me to take advantage of the full value range more than if I was working from two extremes in. I don't think that that's anything that's like a fact of something that's happening. I'm speaking entirely from just personal preference. It's easier for me to explore more values if I let everything exist in the middle, rather than going to the extremes. I feel almost like I just can't see. I like working, say, like if this was a white canvas and I didn't tone it, I would really be having a hard time. I just sort of always liken that to like staring into the sun. It's like when the sun is behind somebody and they're walking towards you, how it's just a lot of silhouette. Like everything is just dark. Like you just can't see anything. Like I don't know if I would have been able to achieve certain subtleties in these colors and transitional values if this was white. Because if this was white, all of this would seem super dark and very hard to see. This allows me to explore this range and then like pop things out in the end.
So, like, in a way, it's additive and subtractive. You have, like, your brightest brights and your darkest darks on the middle.
What do you mean?
By working, I guess in Photoshop terms, it would be like you work at 50% opacity.
Yeah.
And that way you're able to have additive and subtractive tones. So additive being like brightest bright and subtractive being, I guess, darkest dark. Yeah, that's.
Okay, and you mean that like well, I agree with you that does sound like what I'm doing. What do you mean?
No,
I'm just worried that I'm not answering your question.
No, that's a question. I'm trying to help myself kind of like grasp it better, but I think I got it.
Okay.
Jen, do you have any questions for the audience?
I don't know. I don't think so. Not right now. Do you have any questions for the audience?
Be curious to hear what people want out of this demo.
Okay, good question. Does anybody have an answer to that?
Brush strokes for volume, right, and volume in 3D.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Someone else?
Tap the wall pretty better.
Others are just being shy.
Yep.
So we had over 771 people watch the video on Facebook for serious.
Cool.
From Minnesota, Kansas, Alabama, Cleveland, Michigan, Montreal, and LaGuardia Airport. Almost international. Montreal.
That's great.
One in Montreal is Kristen, by the way. Jen.
What?
It's Kristen in Montreal.
Oh my goodness, so cute. I actually was wondering if that was who that was.
Jen, I'm curious, as a modern painter, as you've progressed technically, has that been sort of smooth and consistent progression, or have you had like key moments that have really changed things for you, key learnings or experiences?
I think I actually have, yeah. It's been very consistent. And then I started painting animals, and I really have to say, like, I made a lot of leaps there. It's not to say that I don't care about animal painting. I love it. I am a huge lover of animals. I sometimes really wonder if I like doing it more than painting people. Like I absolutely love them. But with that said, there's something interesting that happens when you're painting a person. People have, whether you're an artist or not, people have a memory for you ready? Okay. So as I go, I build up more and more paint. I haven't quite gotten there yet. We're still kind of in this like middle range. But if paint is lifting, why is paint lifting? So, okay, so I was actually just talking to somebody about this. If you're using a panel, like a real slick panel, I'm using a bristle brush right now, and it's going to lift. Like a slick surface is going to lift the paint off of it. So I'll use the bristle for a while so that it stays at like this, like something really airy. And then I'll switch to a synthetic, because then it won't be like scraping the paint off. If I'm working this way, I have a linen panel, my paint's wet, and let's say that for whatever reason it is beginning to lift, and I don't really know why, I'm just, I will force myself to use way more paint. If you just use more paint, it'll stop lifting off. I would imagine that really to be like the only solution there. Like if that's something that's happening, I would say just use more paint. And I'm a big fan of using more paint, so I fully encourage the use of more paint. Oh, and also just as like a side note, to go back to like this idea of cherry picking the best moments of every pose. He moves his head sometimes up, sometimes down, and you get this little light right there on the cheek. I like that. And you can see that it's there now. Sometimes it's not. And
Feel it, it's warm.
yeah. So that's just something, you know, like if I took the photo and that wasn't there, you know, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to put it in.
I appreciate the nice way of telling me.
You do. This whole experience has been a nightmare for me. I cannot wait for it to be over. Oh, it's so sweet. Okay, so I will move on to this now. Okay, so I'm gonna work here on the eye, crowd pleaser. I'm starting with the darks. I'm always starting with the darks. You should always go dark to light, not the other way around. My dark is a touch of blue, my English red, and some black, mostly English red. Okay.
This is kind of a funny question, but what arm movements are you not into?
I don't really like to speak down to any of them. There's some for sure I don't like. But I think that there's a lot of people who, you know, you're getting into a question about like, I think you could very easily end up finding yourself in a conversation with stuff like that about like, what is art? And I know that that's not exactly what you asked, but I just feel like everybody's trying to do something. And just because it doesn't resonate with me, just because I might not like it or see much value in it, like it doesn't make it illegitimate, I don't think. So I try to stay relatively open as much as I can. I just feel like it allows me to not be too closed off. But I don't know if there's anything happening that I can say I absolutely can't stand. I don't know. I think there's probably value in a lot. Why? Is there something in particular that you're really not on board with?
It's nothing specific. Well, I actually, even if there is, I don't really want to point my finger, but no, I try to stay collective. But there's certain things I just, you know, I mean, yeah, art is subjective in my opinion, but at the same time, I kind of feel like something of effort should be measurable. So if you can kind of, generally speaking, you can see that the effort is really minute. It's kind of like, you know, you wonder why people are talking about this and going to see it in the moment or something.
Yeah.
So related questions, do you feel that effort adds value to art?
Yeah, I think that's a better way to phrase it.
It's interesting, isn't it, then? Because then I feel like you could find yourself saying like, well, what's the effort? You know, where are you directing your effort? You know, like there's a lot of people who may not have a technical ability, but like a phenomenal mind, you know, like where they're putting all of their effort into concept. You know, so there's that too.
Do you think those are similar efforts? I mean, do you value them similarly?
Sure, definitely. I mean, I'm a huge fan of concept, but you know, I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of technique as well. For me, I like both. I love to see a blending of that. I get very bored with work that is nothing but technique. But I also feel like you could have the greatest concept in the world, but if it's not really executed well, you know, you're setting up a roadblock right there, you know. So I think you need both.
What do you feel about technology and art? Making art, being involved in art at all?
Well, in terms of what? Is there something in particular that you're thinking of? Like what kind of technology? I
Maybe
mean,
first in general, technology as in things animated with machines and something that we don't do with our hands.
You mean so? Okay, like maybe something like Photoshop, computer animation, stuff like that.
Even not in art, but in general. Do you have any strong feelings about technology at all?
Narrow it down, like, in 2 minutes.
Oh man. Well, I mean, speaking about animation, you know, for animation, I'm a sucker for traditional animation. You know, Studio Ghibli puts out gorgeous handmade, like handcrafted animations. And there's something about seeing them that just feels, even if it's not perfect, it's very warm and inviting. There's something about it that's almost in a way feels more natural. Plus, it's just impressive. I mean, it's like to be able to say that you're doing something like that entirely by hand is just like mind-blowing to me. But, you know, then you have things like Pixar's putting out, which is stunning in its own way, you know? So I don't know. I see a lot of value in all of it. What is it? What's that animation studio that does the stop motion? Leica? That place is also very impressive. They are obviously using technology. They're doing stop motion, so they have technology involved. But it's this studio that's still doing stop motion, and that's just incredible to me too. So that could be a nice reference for something that's a nice blending of technology meets something a little bit more traditional. In this eye, I'm really looking at shapes. I'm really trying to build all of the shapes within this thing. And being sensitive to the colors, how it's very dark in here. And then as we get into the lower lid, there's something a little bit redder down here. But right now, it's all shapes and a little bit of value. That's what I'm after.
Do you think lies in the future, or what are we going to see more of and less?
I think, unfortunately, we're gonna see less. Well, okay, so I think I was still thinking about animation. I don't know. I really don't know. Some days I find the kind of work I'm doing very promising, where you will encounter a ton of people who really believe in this and just really see a true value for it. And then there's other days where that's just not there, like you really feel like it's going to disappear one day. I'm just not sure. I really don't know.
You mean people interested in figurative painting?
People interested in figurative painting, people even interested in just traditional art, laboring over this, like having somebody sit for you and you just do a painting of them. Like it's, I worry sometimes that it'll disappear because of technology. What do you think?
Digital art?
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot more of all kinds.
Well, ideally, or you think that that's what it'll be?
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
It's going to become again the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, I hope so.
You've obviously heard the whole, this stereotype has been around, I think, forever, but they usually say East Coast is really commercial and West Coast is more Hollywood and high production value. Do you think, I mean, it's changed in some ways, no doubt, but do you think that it's, even like a person from New York can, be called in from like a Spielberg to do like a Drew Struzan type of poster?
That would be awesome. I would love that. I mean, why not? Yeah, I'd love that. It's funny that you even mentioned that because the piece I'm working on next is sort of like an old school, like movie poster kind of idea. It's not a movie poster, but sort of like inspired by that. I love it.
I'm noticing Montreal is really trending right now. Well, specifically like concept art for games and a whole other plethora of different art genres.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I know too much about that, actually. That's great, though. What have you heard about that?
Well, it's kind of a mix from people I was talking to, and then just like usually on Instagram or if you read people's, I guess, art station, it'll tell you their location. And for some reason, they all just happen to be either born and raised in Montreal, or they all just happen to work there. It's strange. It's obviously they're all working from studios, but why is it just there all of a sudden? That's like wrong.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Jen, have you obsessed about anything else than painting?
I love video games. I play them a lot less than I used to, but I love them.
What kind of video games?
Well, I have a PS3. Oh, well, yes, I do, but I have a PS4 right now that I'm using a lot. I am a big fan of Final Fantasy, but I also, the one that I just recently started and have yet to finish is Hellblade, and that's fantastic. I mean, talk about stunning animation. That's absolutely gorgeous what they're putting out.
So you play them for the visuals as much as for the stories?
Yeah, like the visual is certainly important to me, but yeah, the story. I'm a big fan of the story. Which I think is why I was always like from a young age drawn to like Final Fantasy. It's because that's like not, I mean the stories are crazy, but it's like nothing but story.
Is there an old game you remember that marked you?
I don't know. I was obsessed with Zelda. It was probably Zelda.
Zelda?
Yeah.
On what kind of device?
Original Nintendo. I was obsessed with Zelda. It was always very challenging too. I don't think I was actually that good at it, but I loved it.
very many strong female figures in your painting games.
Yeah, Zelda was great. Yeah, I like shamelessly locked myself. Like when I had a Nintendo 64, it had Ocarina of Time on it, Zelda game. And I played that for 13 hours straight. And it was wonderful.
When was this? How old were you?
Yeah, right. That was, how long was that? I was probably 13. I think I was 13.
You read Murakami. Who else do you read?
Murakami is a big one for me. I've read basically everything he's written. He's also the only author, I think, probably because I have a very poor memory, just so I throw that out there. I read a lot. He's really only like, he's my favorite. He's the guy I'll always remember. I pick up a ton of other books, but I don't have another favorite guy. Like I've read a lot of Ross King. He's the guy who wrote Brunelleschi's Dome, Judgment of Paris. Those are the two that are my favorites. I've read Judgment of Paris. I think I've read that like 4 times. I love that one. That's all historical fiction for anybody who doesn't know that guy. But I love him.
I'm about to pick up what I talk about when I talk about running.
Oh, that's not a new book,
No,
is it?
very old.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. What is that one about?
It's about running. I said.
That's exactly
why
it.
I'm picking it up.
Cool.
A healthy obsession.
What inspired you to run a marathon?
Started running this summer after some personal issues, and instead of drinking my way home around Bushwick to East Village, decided I'm gonna run one day.
Cool.
I always hated running. I've always been into sports, played volleyball and stuff like that seriously, but never ran and always hated it. Never run more than 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So decided I'd run from Bushwick to hopefully the Williamsburg Bridge. I failed. I tried again. But I was running forever. I ran onto the bridge, stopped, and realized that it's really dumb because if you're onto the bridge in the middle, you have to go all the way down. It's kind of long. Trapped. So next time I ran over the bridge. And I ran to East Village all the way home. And I thought I ran a marathon. I installed an app and ran with that, and it said that I only ran 6.5 miles from Bushwick to East Village, which seemed very short. And it really told me that I need to run more. And then September was a really nice day. I woke up and I was supposed to meet friends in Brighton Beach, so I ran to Brighton Beach from East Village, and it was 13 miles.
Whoa.
I was dead, but it felt so great.
Cool.
13, not 13. I wish I have never run more. I never run more than 15 miles. So I asked my friends. I've always watched marathon. It was kind of an interesting thing. I asked my friends how to get into a New York race, and just signed up for a 4-mile run, another one, ran the midnight run this year, which is really fun. I've lived in New York since 2004, and how do you spend every New Year? Partying. This one was different. I just went for a 4-mile run with like 3,000 people in 7-degree weather.
Oh my God.
It was fantastic. Completely changed the way to start 2018.
Cool.
I ran a half marathon in February, and then another one this weekend. Last weekend, that Airlines half that took you from Prospect Park through Times Square to Central Park. Times Square is closed only twice a year for New Year's Eve in this run.
Cool.
It was completely unbelievable. It has 20,000 runners, 25,000 runners.
Whoa.
So, so I signed up for a marathon for the one this year. And I'm running for a charity. There's a lottery. If you don't get in, you can always run for a charity. So that's what I'm doing. And I ran this half for a charity, and I'm running the marathon for a charity. So if you care about children, you're welcome to donate. You can throw $20 into the pool. Be amazing.
Cool.
Just go onto the link that Simon will provide at the bottom. Everywhere. Yes. And it will be available on joinnewyork.com. Join New York? Spelled out, yes, spelled out. You know best. I don't know anything about websites.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do at the end, pop out a few things in the eye. I want to put some color in the lips, and I'm gonna try and do the rest of this so we could get our extremes in. So, final 15. Eye, lips, at least a color in the hair, and I'm going to put a background in to sort of like shape a few things out. And hopefully have a little time to at least do a little so that he has a second eye. Okay. A little. Very cold.
I do have two eyes.
Oh, I missed that. Thank you. I didn't see the other one. Okay. Maybe I'll jump over and put the other one in right now.
Appreciate it.
Okay, good.
Someone from the audience came to me and talked about their marathons.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tell everyone in this room that you can run. It's the easiest thing to do and the hardest thing to do.
I always hated running. And I also got into it in the last 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. And I have to say, I really like it now.
So you're running. Didn't tell us.
And well, I'm not running any 15 miles. I'm running like 50 minutes, and that's it.
That's 15 or 50?
50,
Almost an hour, right?
almost an hour, yeah.
That's like a solid 7, 8 miles at least. It's a long time.
I don't know. What if I'm just a really slow runner?
That's okay. Are you?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not fat. No, I haven't timed myself. I don't think I'm fast. No.
Where do you run?
There's a little park near where I live, but I am not running outside in this weather, that's for sure. It's way too cold for me, so I'm on a treadmill right now.
If you use Strava, you'll have at least 1,500 followers from this live stream.
Dan, I asked you earlier, and we were talking about the difference painting animals has made. You started to talk about how going back to painting humans was more something special.
Yes. What was the question though? What? Because I think I did drift a little.
The question was about has your technical progression been steady over
Right.
key turning points and talk about one of the animals.
Definitely. Okay, so it was when I started painting animals. Because okay, so that's what I was gonna say. Like when people have a memory, a certain type of memory for a human face. You're going to know that something's wrong with it, like while you're working, like like regardless of knowing what he looks like or not. Like if I painted this and thought, like if I wasn't paying attention or something and put the eye up here, people are going to know that there's something wrong. Like they're going to know that that's not where an eye should be. People don't have the same kind of memory for animals. Oh my goodness. So that's not to say like that it's not a free-for-all. You can't just do whatever you want and like assume that it's going to just be fine. Like you still need to do something well, but the point I'm making is that you can relax. You can relax a lot more when you're painting an animal. So when I started painting animals, I was realizing that I was focusing a lot less on the drawing and way more on just like exploring the way I was painting. Like it allowed me some freedom to play around with putting thicker paint on. It let me have fun with paint again. Like nothing was too precious. Is that your phone? And so I ended up bringing all of that back into my portraits. And like really that was it. Like I felt like they really helped me learn something about painting because it just let me relax and have some fun.
You found the freedom that you found harder to find painting figures that you were more familiar with.
Totally. Yep. Because of sort of like what I briefly touched on in the beginning, like things are precious. Like you get very attached to what you're doing. Like, oh, it has to be this perfect little eye, or it's like everything has to be perfect, and you get really attached to certain things you're doing, certain strokes you're making, certain lines you're putting down. And you end up just getting like really tense about it. Like you become very scared to explore anything. And when I was doing the animals, not only could I relax and explore paint and paint application and different ways of doing things, it was just for fun. It wasn't a project I was working in. It wasn't for a gallery. It didn't need to be anything. It was just something I was doing entirely for myself. And that just really freed me up to really just like have fun with it again.
It's the hardest thing for you in painting.
Certain parts of the body are very difficult for me. I struggle a lot painting kneecaps. I hate painting kneecaps. The minute I get down there, I am going to lose a whole day just trying to figure out like what's going on down there. It's not that I don't understand the anatomy. There's just something about those shapes that like I just can't, I don't have a rhythm for. Like I still really struggle with that. I think actually joints in general are kind of challenging for me. I think that's it. It's like drawing stuff really. In terms of like paint application, I certainly don't find any of it easy, but this stuff is just, this is fun for me. Like getting to like play around with this. I don't find anything about this like challenging in the way that like, if you asked me to draw a kneecap right now.
I'll spare you. Yeah.
Okay, so. Actually, hold on. The pressure is on. I'm trying to figure out like the best way to resolve this. I have a million things I need to do right now. I'm gonna try and, go ahead. No, I'm just trying to figure out what color to put in your eye.
Do you find any art conceptually difficult to watch, understand, think about?
I don't think so. What do you mean?
I read one of my favorite books, Jennifer Doyle's Hold It Against Me.
Mm-hmm.
It's about difficulty and emotion in contemporary art.
Okay.
How audiences make the piece, especially in performance art.
Uh-huh.
The way the audience feels is very changes with time and context. And sometimes the piece itself may be very easy, but the way it's perceived is really rough and emotionally difficult.
Mm-hmm. So
Controversial. So I wonder if you have any feelings about art that make it difficult.
oh.
How do you feel about art?
I don't think that I have ever encountered anything that has been a challenge for me to digest. I think I'm pretty open. I don't know, nothing has hit me yet as something that I just can't wrap my head around. Does that make sense? Is that?
That's a straight answer. Is there any art that makes you particularly sad or happy?
What do you think of pop art?
You know, none of the, I'm not, it's not to say that I'm not moved by things, like that's not the case, but I have to, like, people will speak about how they've encountered something, they've found a painting and they just like lost their minds in front of it, like they're like weeping in front of it. Like I haven't had that experience. I haven't encountered anything that has brought up that kind of emotion for me, like good or bad. I haven't had that experience in my life.
So you don't feel the paintings?
Yes, I don't have any emotions. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I can vouch for that. I go to a lot of galleries. I barely ever. I mean, I'll admire the work tremendously, but I'll never like, you know, it's never a tearjerker for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned Rapin. His paintings don't make you feel anything in particular?
Well, the Ivan the Terrible painting is phenomenal. I mean, that invokes a lot right there. But no, I mean, like I think that you're after like a certain kind of like real moving experience I've had. And I really have to say that as much as I can see in a painting like that, I don't feel it. I don't have that deep emotion when I'll see something. It hasn't happened yet. Have you had one that has really touched you?
Certainly, but we asked you that question.
Well, I kind of answered it. I haven't had it yet. It hasn't hit me yet.
I do feel a lot of things when I see figurative painters translate life into paintings. People like Stephen Assael.
Mm-hmm.
It's something else. Always something in those eyes.
Yeah. No, he's great.
You ever throw out failed paintings?
I don't. I keep them. I might paint over them, but for the most.
Wow, it's like, I keep all these old paintings just facing down in the basement.
I think that you really need to keep those.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep it. I just don't want to look at them.
Yeah, that's fine. But I would dig them out once in a while. That's why I keep mine. Just even it's just always really interesting to me, like ones that I think were failures, they still might be like as a painting. Like you could probably still say like, oh well, you know, it's good that I abandoned this one. It just wasn't gonna work. But chances are there's something in that is way better than you remembered it being. And I always find that very interesting. Just like how hard you can be on yourself, like while you're working on something, and then you end up like bringing it out again and you're just like, oh, I actually did a pretty good job with this. Or they're just fun to like see progress that you've made. You know, it's like if there's ever a time where you're like really down on yourself and you're just like, I'm painting the same way that I painted last year and I'm not growing, blah, blah, blah. Like break out those old paintings and you're going to see exactly how much better you've gotten.
Can I ask what you use to highlight that? What color?
That is emerald green, black, and English red. And now I'm throwing in a little bit of ochre.
Do you have a goal in terms of your own progress?
Yeah, I want to get better at like I became really obsessed with alla prima painting, and I felt like I really had to like, it was almost like I had something to prove to myself, like this idea that I could like show off the brushstrokes and you know, don't blend anything like together, don't smush anything together, and then I kept working and like realized that I'd really like to like harness that, and it's like not everything has to be super brushy. And so right now I'm actually in the middle of trying to figure out how to like harness these things that I like having areas that are significantly more polished against things that are super brushy. Like I think it's totally fine. Like I think that you should be very aware of what your strengths are, but just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that it has to exist everywhere in the painting. Like, so I'm trying to figure out like where to like push and pull with stuff. Like, where's it going to be super polished? Where are we going to like really highlight certain brush strokes over here? So I'm trying to basically like control myself right now and harness that.
Maybe it's something longer term.
Like in terms of like, I think I'm taking on a ton of commission work right now, and I love that. But I would like to find a way of balancing that a little bit more, where I can find the time to do more work for galleries again. So I think a long-term goal would be like to continue on with like the trajectory I currently have, like getting to do commission work, and but also really finding the time to work on my own stuff too. Like I really have put that on hold, and that is bothering me. So
When you're on working in conceptual paintings,
definitely, yep.
figurative but conceptual,
Yeah,
strong enough.
that's right.
I have a 7-year-old daughter who's really into art.
What
What would you tell her?
Oh my goodness. What kind of art is she into?
She's a poet.
Oh,
She types up poems of how she's alone sometimes.
no, really?
She's very cheeky about it, but I'm alone. No toys, no parents, no nothing.
Oh my
Alone in
goodness.
my room.
Oh. That is so interesting. That's so sweet.
She's really into drawing, obviously. All kinds of art. We see a lot of art, so
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good that you take her around.
oh yeah, all the art fairs, shows, endlessly.
God, I don't know.
Give your own 7-year-old self advice.
Yeah. I did a podcast once where this was like the final question of like, what would you tell the other generations or younger generations? A very challenging question. Yeah, right. I think that it's really easy to get swept up in other people's opinions about the work that you're doing, especially with where we're living now. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody's reading what everybody's doing. Everybody's seeing what we're all doing. And it's hard, it's really difficult to maintain your own voice. I think it's very easy to have it be corrupted intentionally, unintentionally, with just the amount that we're exposed to. So I would just say to like really stay, like just always like be on a path of self-discovery, like figuring out like what you like, trying hard to not lose your voice in everything that we're exposed to now. I think that's actually really important. Like too many people get influenced by the stuff around them, and they totally lose sight of what's important. I was just speaking to somebody about something similar, and they're already saying that like it's difficult to figure out exactly what they like because they're already starting to change things. Like they might have an idea about something that they want to paint, but then they'll say, oh, but you know what? I don't think that'll get me very many likes on Instagram. And then they just stop. They won't do it anymore. It's like, well, I don't think that that's the way to go about it, you know?
Thank you. That's great advice. Also, this audience has not been giving us enough likes on Instagram.
Oh, did it not go on?
I don't know. I wonder how far we were. For your timer.
Oh, yeah. It never went on. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.